SP 46 through 50, you have Jared Jones, Yusei Kikuchi, Christopher Sanchez, Sandy Alcantara, and Spencer Arrighetti. Such an interesting group. Honestly, Scott, if you want to give a quick thought on each, feel free. I just wanted to point out with Arrighetti, final 13 starts, a 3.08 ERA, 118 whip, 10.8 K per nine, 13.3% swinging strike rate, massive whiff potential. I like Spencer Arrighetti quite a bit as well.
Yeah, his early ADP is a good example of why I'm not sure the people putting together that early ADP are people who do what we do, who analyze fantasy baseball as like their job, because we know Arrighetti was a different pitcher at the end of the season, and yet he's being drafted so far like a guy who had a 4.53 ERA and 141 whip last year, which technically he did, but that's not who he was by the end of last season. And so 50, I think, is great value for him if time doesn't push him up the rankings. Jared Jones, we were head over heels for him early in the season. It was basically just April. He was pretty good for most of May too, but pretty useless after that. And I know he spent some time on the IL, but even when he was healthy, Jared Jones just wasn't sharp and didn't seem like he was fooling anybody. He wasn't getting whiffs like he was. 829 on for Jared Jones, 8.8 fantasy points per game. That is dreadful. That is like, let me give you an example. Like Chris Bassett was 9.3 for the year in a terrible year for him. And Jared Jones was worse than that from May 29th on. So I think there's upside. I think he'll be better in the long run, but I'm treating him with skepticism because I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. Down to 48 just because it felt like I was too high on him compared to the consensus. And he's more of a floor pick than a ceiling pick, not a big strikeout guy, but threw a lot of innings for the Phillies. Obviously, good team backing him, high ground ball rate. The control, we're a little less sure about the control for Sanchez, but he has the potential to be a good strike thrower. So I see Christopher Sanchez as like a much better, a much more predictable version of Ranger Suarez, and would rather have him by about 30 spots in the rankings here. Alcantara coming back from injury. First Tommy John for him, but we're not exactly sure how that's going to play, and he wasn't the profile for Alcantara even before Tommy John surgery. Didn't feel totally secure. He was great, but in an unconventional way, not a big strikeout rate, a lot of ground balls. It's going to be kind of a tightrope. It was always kind of a tightrope walk for Sandy Alcantara, but coming back from Tommy John surgery, more risk of him, I think, losing his balance and falling off the tightrope. And then he's got the Marlins backing him, which is just
not great.
That makes it extra hard for him to matter. And then I already mentioned Arrighetti. Talked about him at number 50. So there you have it, my top 50 pitchers. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody we didn't get to in that top 50 that we just have to say something about?
My computer's kind of running slowly. I wanted to pull up ADP and maybe look through who are some of the names you have just outside your top 50.
Okay, well, just outside my top 50. 51 is Brandon Woodruff, also coming back from injury. 52 and 53, Ryan Pepio and Taj Bradley, who I've moved down based on where the Rays will be playing their games next year. I think it's going to be really tough for them. Bowden Francis comes in 54. And then you get Ronel Blanco and Luis Gil, two pitchers who I don't totally believe in, but they had great years right after that. But notably, those are the names outside the top 50. So we're clearly dropping off there in terms of tier, because I've been saying all along, 15 to 50, I don't care so much about the order. I think it's almost one giant tier. Those pitchers I just mentioned are outside of that tier.
I'll mention some names in ADP that are kind of inside the top 50 starting pitchers drafted right now that you don't have ranked that way.
Okay.
So Kevin Gausman, Shane Baz, Robbie Ray, Zach Eflin, Brandon Pfaadt, Luis Gil. Those are, that kind of rounds out that's a similar range. So those were names that you didn't have in your top 50 or even top 55, right? I don't think I heard any of those names. So,
Well, Luis Heel feels like the opposite of Spencer Arrighetti, where it's just people looking at it's people looking at the full season numbers and coming away impressed, and not looking at the breakdown, how he got to those full season numbers. Where great start for Luis Heel, dreadful finish, and there was reason for skepticism even when he was pitching well. So I tend to put more stock in the finish. Kevin Gausman, that feels like a legacy pick. We saw clear decline from him this past year. He's 58 for me, but yeah, outside that group, Shane Baz, he was solid, but he didn't have his slider and didn't get strikeouts at the rate we were hoping for. And I'm just not sure where he stands. If he's totally 100%, or we didn't totally know what kind of pitcher he was before the Tommy John surgery. So I think there's a lot of questions Boz has to answer, and I can't really understand taking him ahead of Christopher Sanchez, for instance, when Sanchez just feels so stable. Did it raise an eyebrow for you that I have Zac Gallen as low as 33rd? Because I kind of separated him from the rest of those top of the ranking mainstays who are good at eating innings, the Pablo Lopez and Aaron Nola types. Gallen's usually ranked up there with them. I dropped them a lot, but I dropped him even more. How do you feel about that?
I think it's all right. I think there's an argument to be made either way. But the fastball effectiveness is declining, and the whip was high last year. Walks were a problem. He has this like underlying, is there an injury kind of lingering from a couple years ago? So I think it's fine. I think anywhere from like the 24 to 36 range, like that SP3 range, I think that's fine for Zac Gallen.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of just come to the point with him where, okay, that 2.54 ERA in 2022 is such an outlier. He's more like a 3.60 ERA guy, sort of like I was saying for Pablo Lopez. And then there was just a lot of weirdness in the second half that makes me wonder if Gallen's completely healthy.
Yeah.
So that's why he's another dozen spots lower than Pablo Lopez. But 33 still puts him in the same range as Spencer Schwellenbach, Hunter Brown, and Grayson Rodriguez. So it's not as much of a diss as it looks like, but it is while some pitchers that seemed too low just kept getting pushed down, Gallen was pulled down a little more deliberately.